So welcome guys to the Restore podcast. I'm here with a good friend and colleague and legend, Natalie Pinkham. How are you, Natalie? You right?
I'm great. I'm so good, thanks. Yeah. How are you? God, you
Yeah.
must be working seriously hard right now.
Yeah, it's been difficult. It's been an interesting time. This might be the only pandemic we actually live through, which would be a relief if it is. But yeah, interesting time to be a paramedic at this time in life. But yeah, yeah. But listen, that's really brings me on to how we met actually, because we were just trying to rack our brains. Was it really about 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know whether there's just some unspoken link between us, but I was literally thinking about you when you messaged me the other day asking to come on this podcast. And the reason I was thinking about you was I was thinking about how you'd be coping now in this pandemic. And the way it came about was that the Mail on Sunday contacted me and asked if I'd like to be a paramedic for the day and write about it for the paper and just sort of give my perspective as a complete outsider with no medical training at all. And I didn't know what to expect. And I thought, yeah, I thought actually I'd be really squeamish, and I'd struggle and I'd panic and I'd get anxious and emotional and all the rest of it. But anyway, I went along and I shadowed you for the day on bicycles around Soho. And I'll let you kind of flesh out some of the detail about what we did. But all I'd love to say now is the reason I was thinking about you was it was genuinely one of the best days of my life. I absolutely loved it. I had this crazy, like, natural high at the end of it. And it really made me think about, what I was doing with my life, whether I was going in the right direction. It made me sort of really take stock. And I remember cycling home. It was quite a long way to get home because I was living in Wandsworth at the time. And I remember cycling home and sitting on my little balcony of my flat and drinking a cold beer and just going into this kind of like Zen-like state, thinking about what you do every day, which is just incredibly rewarding and, obviously full of tension and drama and jeopardy, but ultimately an amazing job that genuinely gives back. So I can't speak highly enough. I know everyone's doing it at the moment about the NHS, but it's the truth. I mean, you guys are genuine everyday heroes, and I don't think none of us have really stopped to take notice and take stock and really appreciate all you do. So thank you.
Oh, listen, absolute pleasure. It was a pleasure to have you along with me that day, because I think a couple of things really. It's nice to have people along with a different perspective, and again, so you could have a deep dive into what we see on a daily basis. But yeah, some of the complexities of, because I think on that day we saw quite a few homeless people. We saw a few just people who were commuting. I think one girl with a fractured ankle. I think that was the last patient of the day. But yeah, just it was a nice cross section of society really. And I think what it illustrates is just the daily struggle that people have. And I think one of the unique perspectives which fortunately you came on the journey with me is just, yeah, you get that unique kind of narrative of actually how much people struggle under the surface of a well coutured or sort of tailored what looks to be a normal life, but actually everyone's struggling through. Everyone's getting up early. Everyone's kind of, everyone's just trying to get through the day. And it's a real pleasure to have you along, because you could just see that a real cross section of the workload, and everyone struggles. And do it on a bike, so we were getting fit in the process. But it was
well, you were definitely already fit. You were like zooming off and I was like panting away trying to keep up with you. But yeah, you're so right. It was such an interesting cross section of people. And actually I remember one guy that really stuck with me was the guy that fell off the curb and broke his hip. And I was sort of like looking around, like taking it all in, thinking, this is like the hustle and bustle of central London, and you will meet every type of person from all types of different backgrounds going about their daily lives, but they never know when they're going to have to call on a paramedic for help.
Yeah.
And I will talk about you like you're not here for a minute, but I remember so clearly thinking that I was going to panic and be like useless. and I probably was useless, but what I did is I found myself mirroring your behavior, and you were so calm, like in all these crazy situations where, you know, anybody would just whip up into a bit of a frenzy. You just injected this incredible calm. And I found myself and the patients, in fact, copying you. And that must just be some human instinct that we naturally do. So you just had this incredible effect on every bit of chaos that we entered. Because let's face it, there were loads of pockets of chaos that we jumped from place to place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. I really appreciate that. I think it's something that doesn't always necessarily come naturally to me, but like you say, you kind of try and exude that. I mean, part of this podcast really, Natalie, is around self-care and just coming into work in a place of, and same for you, coming into a place of work from a place of rest and restoration, so you can give your best at work, but also come back to a place of restoration. Because I think there's so much in life that takes from us, especially at work, but kids as well, and relationships, that you need to have almost a safe space of, and a safe place of restoration. That might be family, that might be relationships around you, but I definitely know I've turned up to days at work where it might seem that way on the surface, but underneath I'm just like, and just struggling to sort of model that. But you're right. I think doing it for the patient's sake, I think just to give them a sense of reassurance and a sense of calm, because just what you're notioning to there, which I think is powerful, which is just, a lot of physical health starts with good mental health. So if you can embody a sense of calm, say Sarah came to you and you were having a heart attack, or you've just had fallen off a curb and broken your hip. If I can embody a sense of calm in you and say, look, we're going to not only address your physical needs, your pain needs, but we're here for you. Like, I'm going to sort you out over the next hour or two. You just sit back, just try and stay calm, because everything else is going to be, hopefully that puts you at rest, puts your physiology at rest, puts your heart rate at rest, your blood pressure. And you can kind of hopefully just relax a little bit. I mean, but one of the things I learned, and I think so you're in the media industry, part of my job really is just to de-escalate people, de-escalate myself, and de-escalate stressful situations. And if you can't do that as a fundamental attribute of who you are, and you must have to do it, do you have to do it in the media, sort of de-escalate people around situations?
I think it's interesting, because I won't pretend for 1 second that what I do is anywhere near as important as what you do. But on two levels, what you're saying resonates. So on one, as a mum, I definitely feel that my behavior will be mirrored by my kids. So if there's a tricky situation, actually we had one yesterday where a homeless guy approached me and my daughter, and she's 3, and he looked a bit scary. All his teeth had sort of fallen out and he was struggling, and he asked me for money, and she was a bit confused by why he wanted money, and actually didn't have any money because nobody has cash anymore. That actually must be problematic for rough sleepers, because no one has any cash. So I said, well, I'll go back into the shop that we were in and buy him a sandwich. And then Willow was sort of like asking me questions about it, and I knew that I needed to not be panicked by the situation in any way, but also explain to her why we were doing what we were doing. And that is so important. You've got such a responsibility as a mum to do that, haven't you, just to sort of imbue that in your kids. But in terms of work, look, I think, and again, I'm a work in progress, I haven't perfected the skill, but when a race is finished, or someone's, like a driver's crashed out of Formula 1 race, obviously emotion is really sort of searing through their veins, and they will be probably pissed off with another driver or themselves, or the stewards, or whatever it is. And you've got to try and channel some of that, because the viewers want to see that raw emotion and feel what they're feeling at that moment in time, but also encourage the driver to trust you in that moment, that you're not looking to trip them up or stitch them up. Because I think that's the biggest problem that I face, is that in a work context, is that journalists, there's this like massive umbrella term, and they all think that you're trying to stitch them up, trip them up, catch them out, whatever. and look for a headline. And that's never been my approach. My approach is more just to talk to them as a human being and say, you know, okay, it's not the end of the world. You're still earning tens of millions a year and driving, you know, living the dream.
Yeah.
But today was a bad day at the office, and, you know, just help us as viewers and fans of the sport understand that.
100%, 100%. And another thing really is, I think, you know, listening to some of your podcast episodes, just the way you put people at ease and tease out the best in people for as guests. Actually, having listened to some of the episodes that you've done with colleagues and friends that I know as well, just the way you come across and the way you can kind of tease the best out of people by putting them at rest, actually, and that in itself is a skill. How do you find you get the best out of people? Either interviewing them for the podcast or indeed for sports people?
Yeah, I think the thing is, I don't want to sort of seem like I'm being manipulative, like I'm only doing it because I want to get something out of them that they haven't revealed to anyone else. But I just genuinely love people, meeting people, talking to people from all walks of life. And this is what I've found with my podcast, is it allows me to do that. My job allows me to do it to a certain extent, but obviously it's always going to be the same type of people in sport. But podcasts, you can pretty much talk to whoever you want. And I just love hearing people's stories. I'm genuinely interested, and I just love it. I mean, I would happily do my podcast every day, a podcast every day for the rest of my life. It's communicating, isn't it? It's learning, and it's, but in terms of, do you know what, in terms of the drivers, it's funny because some who should probably remain nameless, when I retire, I'll write a book.
There's a book.
There's
a book in
it. I'll name and shame. But it's funny because some do get quite emotional, and I like that actually because it's passion. But some get really arsey, and I feel like saying to them, do you know what? It's not my fault that you were crap today. Neither is it the fans' fault. And actually, the fans effectively pay your wages, because if they weren't watching this, there wouldn't be the sponsorship, there wouldn't be the television rights, and you wouldn't get paid these enormous sums. So why not just talk to your fans? And you know what, if you don't like me, just use me as your conduit. You know, I'm the messenger. Just use me to speak directly to them. And they kind of deserve to know the truth, because they're your fans, and without them, you've got nothing. But it was quite interesting because I will tell you, one of the drivers, I remember talking to Daniel Ricciardo, who, you know, to know him is to love him. He's just a terrific bloke. But he said, I said, oh, look, I'm so sorry. He just had a really rubbish day. I said, I'm so sorry. And he goes, don't be sorry. Come on. My bad day is anyone else's great day. I am racing cars, for goodness sake. I'm not saving lives. Yeah. And I just went, do you know what? You've gone up even higher in my estimation and all the fans. But you're so right. You're so right. What are we worried about? You know, when we look at what people like you do for a living, and I think that's why I felt so exhilarated after I did just one day with you, is that, you know, you must come back and go, I've actually, in my small way, changed the world today.
Yeah, so yeah, very much sometimes, Natalie. Just what you were saying there, really. Sometimes you'd be in the middle of a situation on scene, and you know you're internalizing it, just thinking, "Fucking hell!" Like, what is going on? Like, there's bits of information here. There's people screaming over there. There's people crying here. There's confusion here. There's someone dying over there, and under the sort of the skin, I'm just like, right, let's just get some semblance of control. Even if you don't have control, just embody it and just try and infer it to other people, and then verbalize a plan to the team so we can start to get some kind of formula or sequential action going. But you're right, the power of perspective, having that perspective, as you were just saying with the Formula One driver, just you know what, seeing a lot of death every day, and just being honest with you, like, it really does make me grateful. If I'm being really honest with you, Natalie, over this last pandemic time, having been to people who've died in their early 60s, late 50s, 30, you know, in their early to mid 30s as well, I speak to my mum and dad now every day and think, oh my gosh, like, I'm so grateful for their lives. And I always have been that way, but I just think more so now it's been compounded because if you, again, you have lived a day through my eyes, but if people could live a day through my eyes, you almost live 1,000 years in one day sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
you're right, sitting back with that beer at the end of the day, just thinking, oh my gosh, like, and just going through some of the emotions and some of the, having to, I had something which was really difficult for me the other day, was actually, being standing in front of a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old little girl, having their dead father in the other room, and them inquiring of me what was happening. And if I'm being really honest, I didn't have it in me to break the bad news to them. So I had to really just refer to the mother and get the mum in and just really calm the mum down, and then just get the mum to take care of the kids. And I kind of sat back into the advanced paramedic car and just thought, oh, like, and that was one of like 6 different cardiac arrests that day that I'd been to. And I was, yeah, I didn't have any words for that situation, for such a synergist moment in time for their lives. Like, and I just thought, I can't bring this around to a place where I can build rapport with them quickly enough to infer the gravity of the situation. So I said to the mom, I said, look, you're going to have to break this news to them, because I can't. And you're fully aware of what's happened here. And managed to calm her down. And then she went in and did that. But I just, yeah, so it is difficult, and it's not without its challenges sometimes. But you're right, learning to become, I suppose, emotionally resilient in a way, really, because I mean, not to hark on about it too much, but you just told me just recently, just now, you've had some really horrendous times where close friends have died, and your emotional resilience through that time, and having to transcend some probably crazy emotions as a result.
Yeah, do you know what? It's interesting because my close friend of mine, took her life just before the coronavirus sort of really kicked in, and it was weird because actually her funeral was one of the last funerals that was like big funerals that was allowed to happen. I'm so actually grateful for that, because that was a massive part of the healing for me. I don't for 1 minute feel healed altogether from it, but the only thing I would say is that so the funeral definitely helped in that respect, but then attention shifted so quickly to the pandemic that I almost feel like she's been forgotten a bit. And it's a bit weird because I struggle, like, even by me, because my attention has had to shift onto homeschooling 2 kids and working from home and like adjusting to this new norm. And then I get a quiet moment where I think about her and I think, oh my God, it has only been a matter of weeks that she took her own life. And it was so it was so tragic and just such an aggressive way to die. It's just, I don't know, it was brutal. And I don't feel like I've fully grieved her because my brain has been, whirring with everything that's been going on. Having said that, I have spoken to other friends of hers and family members who've said that actually the lockdown strangely has been quite helpful because they haven't had distractions from outside, and they've had to talk amongst themselves and process stuff, and that's actually been quite therapeutic. So there's definitely been plus sides to it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You touched on earlier about this, the mental health side of the pandemic, and I'm quite interested in that because on the one hand, I have these like really calm, happy moments where there's no planes going over. We live in a flight path. There's no planes. The sky is blue, like nature's restoring itself. There's something really beautiful about that. And there's far fewer cars on the roads. My kids are at home with me. It's just, I feel very lucky to be getting this incredible time with my kids because I'm normally so busy with work. And then I suddenly swing into getting anxious. And it normally happens just as I'm nodding off, I'm trying to go to sleep, suddenly all these horrendous thoughts start filling my head. And I know just from talking to other people that others have felt the same, that it's a lot to do with sleep, that you sort of try and bury these thoughts and then they rear their ugly heads at night time. You have bad dreams, very vivid dreams, or you just can't sleep at all. And I suppose that is the sense that we're lacking control of the situation and it's running away from us. And so you go from thinking, well, I'm not stressed about this pandemic and I feel okay about it. And then the next minute you think, shit, but what if, we lose someone close to us because of it? Because it's indiscriminate and anyone can get it. How on earth do you kind of just calm these two levels down and don't get too carried away with one or the other?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Natalie, actually. So I just think you're right. I think a lot of people live in, micro or little ecosystems, especially in lockdown at the moment. You've got a microcosm of each household, in lockdown and their own sort of scenarios playing out. And gosh, I went to I've been to some really difficult patients recently, a lot of mental health problems. I went to a young chap in his 30s who hung himself recently, and then quite a few various overdoses of sorts in other various patients, and trying to. Sometimes there's no words for it, actually, because you come in as a sort of senior critical care paramedic, and again it's quite formulaic, but the peripheries, which are quite central around their friends trying to resuscitate them and so on. My words aren't really necessarily, they're hopefully useful and calming, but you almost can't reach to the gravity of the situation. And also what I just get this deep sadness, because under what circumstances led them to this horrific act, really. And you're right, how can we get to these people before they fall over the edge? How can we recognize the signs and reach out to them just on a personal level before they go to this place? And it's really, oh gosh, it's really difficult. And you're right, it's a heaviness. And I find, if I'm being really honest, I find those calls the hardest, those incidents the hardest, where it's suicide, and especially with hangings, because one of their friends had to get them down and start resuscitating them, and trying to reassure them when the outcome is predefined and predestined is super hard, really. And again, like you say, I wish I had a time machine. I think you wish, we all wish we had a time machine. We wish we could go back 3 or 4 weeks or a couple of months and just get to people before they get to that stage. One of the things, Natalie, I realize about mental health and about suicide is quite a socially isolating pathology. And what I mean by that is, actually, a lot of people commit suicide on their own. They don't do it in a plenary of people. They do it generally on their own. And what I've really learned is, if you can circumvent that isolation, you really can navigate people away from that place of desperation, because community breaks that. I mean, it's to your earlier point, it does me a world of good having these conversations. I love connecting with people, and actually sometimes when I'm feeling shit and down, actually just to Skype someone, or just to be around someone, just that itself is a tonic to me. So how much more would it be to these people who are just on the brink and on the cusp of doing something horrendous?
So is this lockdown then proving to be a catalyst, because so many people are just having, like, they're forced to be on their own at the moment? I can't believe how many of my mates are on their own, because if you're single and you live on your own, you're locked down on your own.
Absolutely, Natalie, absolutely. I think you're right. It is a catalyst, and it's an incremental shift towards more of an extreme place in that way. And one thing I would just say and say throughout sort of these podcasts really is, if anyone feels like isolated or alone, it's A, pick up the phone, and B, try and do something for someone else just to bring you away from that feeling of self. But you're right, it's really hard. It's really hard when we're being told to stay at home. It's really hard when we're being told, you know, to stay in, isolate yourself. And there's that underlying need, fundamental need for connection that we all have, you know, and that your friend had, that we have, that you have, that I have. And you're right, the beauty of family, which you articulated earlier, which I really loved, was the fact you can really connect with your son now on a deeper level, and it's a way where he's giving you a kiss, you're giving him a kiss. Whereas, and not to say that work detracts for that, but it kind of does a lot of times, because
it does. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I spend so much of my life questioning, how much I should be working, how much I should be a mum. Like, I want to be a strong role model to my kids, that, you know, there's no substitute for hard work. My mum always worked. I never felt a lack of love from her. She's an incredible mum. I actually really respected her and wanted to emulate her because she worked so hard. But geez, my kids are 5 and 3. They want their mum around. And to see that shift in my son's behaviour since lockdown has been so stark and actually incredibly moving. And it makes me realise that, well, he did used to get, and he does still get, and he may still get when I go back to work, pissed off with me leaving. Like, you can tell he doesn't want me to go. And then when I come back, he resents me and he's like, where did you go? And my daughter's much more forgiving and loving and just is grateful to have me home and is great. But my son is definitely a bit trickier. And since the lockdown, he is just so, it's like he's blossomed. Our relationship has blossomed. I obviously have always adored him, always been very close to him, but he'd have these little tantrums and just be a bit tricky, you know. And now, I mean, honestly, for the last month, I haven't had one, I can't believe I'm saying this, I haven't had one tantrum. They haven't had one argument between them, not even squabbles. He just wants to kiss and cuddle me. Part of me wonders whether this massive outpouring of affection on his part is a bit of anxiety. He definitely knows that there's something going on, you know. Well, of course they both do, but he's nervous about corona. Like, he said to me, Mummy, how old are you? And I said, why? And he said, because if you're over 60, it's more dangerous to have corona. I was like, oh, you know, that's the problem with having the news on all the time. They absorb everything. These little brains are just like sponges sucking it all up. And he keeps asking me, you know, are Granny and Grandpa and Grandma and Gramp going to die of corona? He keeps saying it to me. Like, so this poor little brain is trying to process all this stuff. So that might also account for why he's being so clingy and affectionate. But, you know, whatever the reasons, I'm bloody loving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get so many cuddles every day now. I'm just like,
but to your earlier point, Natalie, I think it's a powerful one. It's not necessarily the absence or presence of time, or the presence of time. It can be a blessing and a curse depending on how you use it, I think. Because, like you said, an abundance of time to someone who's single and or doesn't have a social network and or just feels quite disconnected, if not used in a positive way, it can really start to work against you. But that same amount of time, Natalie, like you say, for you can be, you know, you can build rapport with your kids, you can start to really homeschool them, you can reassure them, you can be present as a mother, you know, morning, noon and night. And it just, what it does is it really, I think it's a mandate, really, just to use time wisely. And like I said, even work from a place of, if you're isolated right now listening to this, or if you're feeling depressed, my thing would be pick up the phone to someone, either a friend or family, and then actually, even if you can start to get involved in some volunteer schemes. And what I've realized is, even volunteering, it just gets you around people, it takes you away from yourself, from your problems, and takes you away from just that sort of negative mindset of depression. But
I think also people really miss touch.
yes,
like, you can't underestimate touch. Like, even doing these podcasts, it's like we'd have given each other a hug when we met and when we left, and that you properly connect as humans when you touch. And I think that's something that's really lacking at the moment, and to the point that you can be walking down the street and people actually back away from you.
I found that bizarre.
It's this
Yeah.
weird paranoia is fueling it. And I think we don't realize how much we just need that little physical connection every time, which, you know, again, great if you've got family and friends, you're living with people, because you can have hugs as often as you want. But if you're on your own and you haven't been touched or held for weeks now, shit, that's so hard. And that's why I totally agree with you that whatever we can do as individuals for others at a time like this is more crucial than ever, which is why your job is more crucial than ever. But actually, we all want to feel useful. And it goes back to my day as a paramedic with you. I just loved feeling useful for, you know, a day. Like, and we'll talk more about Formula One soon, but there are things that we're doing in Formula One that is for the wider, greater good. And, you know, I've never felt so proud of our sport. But I think this is making us all really take stock and reevaluate and work out different practices and different ways forward, you know, once this lockdown's over.
Yeah.
But I hope there'll be plenty of positives to come from this.
Yeah, you're right, actually. And I think you're right. It's just trying to tether and cleave the positives out of what has been quite a difficult and tough period, really. Absolutely. So just to look at that in a sort of a sliver, and just look at the Formula One, because I think there is some similarities between Formula One and the teams which I am trying to orchestrate on scene within sort of a cardiac arrest, or, you know, just the well disciplined approach. Just everyone knows their role, everyone practices their role, everyone is kind of hopefully quite situationally aware within Formula One. You know, everyone's got their kind of earpieces in. Everyone is, you know, in the process of incremental gains. Everyone knows that, you know, it's microseconds between winners and losers. So it's, you know, everything is at an optimum. And that's what I'm, I suppose, trying to embody within pre-hospital care is, because again, going home from shift, Natalie, you know, I want to make sure, hand on heart, that I've done everything I can for people in that day. And so in the same way, kind of trying to incrementally improve everything across the board. What do you see? How, sort of, I guess my question would be, sort of, you're in an ecosystem of discipline, really. It's a finely well-oiled machine, so to speak, but it's an ecosystem of discipline. Does that sort of, has that affected you? Do you see, it must be fascinating just seeing the intricacies of just the micro details of cleaving a little bit of a vantage here and there and everywhere.
100%. I remember starting in the sport, you know, whatever, 9 years ago now, and I remember one of the cameramen turning up about the interview was at sort of 2:10. It was quite sort of random, but what I realized very quickly is that every minute counts, and it was 2:10 because then the next one was at 2:20, and then one after that was at 22, and every minute of the day is accounted for and used well. And the cameraman was like a minute late turning up, and the driver's manager said no interview, and I was like, whoa, like 30 seconds, no interview. And it's interesting because from then on, you know, you're never late, you're early for everything.
Yeah.
And you realize that everything is down to the last second, in millisecond. But as you talk about incremental gains and the marginal gains, and it makes you grateful for that, because it's really, everything's the cutting edge of technology, and you're working with some of the brightens in the world on aerodynamics and all the engineers that work in the sport, but the drivers as well. You know, it's impressive stuff, and it is the ultimate teamwork. Now, a lot of people assume that Formula One is an individual sport, you know, because there's just one driver in the car, but it actually is the ultimate team sport. It's, you know, we're talking hundreds within a team, and if one person does their job wrong, then everything can unravel. And everybody has very clearly defined roles that they stick to. That's not to say that they can't adapt and overcome if something else goes wrong. They pull together. But really, I'm sort of questioning myself I've questioned myself in Formula One a couple of times. The first time was when I first came into the sport in 2011, and I'd just been working over in Romania looking for a little girl who had been abandoned many years before, who I'd worked with in an orphanage, and we thought she'd been trafficked, and I was trying to sort of find her, to tell the story of a whole lost generation of children through one little girl's eyes. And like a microcosm, if you like, of the wider generation of kids that had all been abandoned into orphanages. This is talking like 15 years, 20 years ago now. And so I went back to look for this one girl just as I was starting to work in F1. So I'd come from the sewers under Bucharest, ploughing through crap looking for this little girl, syringes and rats. And suddenly I pop up in the paddock in Formula One, 3 steps from the next billionaire, and I'm going, what? Like, I can't reconcile these two in my mind. And I remember ringing my mum, and this was another reminder that mums are always right. She said to me, don't you dare quit your job, because actually what you will do is you can leverage your position in one to help the other. And I realized that there were a lot of very bright, very interesting and altruistic people who were ready, willing and able to help me in my plight, to help the children, abandoned children in Eastern Europe. So anyway, that was like a 5-year story condensed into 2 minutes there. But I ultimately was able to fundraise and use the skill sets of a lot of the people in Formula One to help me build a house for her and 12 other kids. And it was just an amazing kind of transfer of skills and money to help this little girl. And then my other example is obviously now, but I had a point about 6 years ago when I went to visit Birmingham Children's Hospital, and I was able to see the telemetry that was applied in Formula One into hospitals. So for example, if we're able to be predictive in Formula One, so we're able to say, look, in 10 laps time, this is going to be a problem which will end Lewis Hamilton's race unless you do something now. And they were able, I mean, I'm putting it in the most simplistic terms here, but they're able to then transfer that into children's, specifically heart monitors, and obviously use kind of medical intervention to prevent that heart problem becoming fatal. And I felt like I burst with pride at that moment, and it was nothing to do with me, but I just thought, oh my God, this sport is amazing. We're actually saving lives. And now fast forward to 2020, we're obviously doing it with ventilators, and I'm loving this collaboration. I don't know if you read about it, but 7 of the Formula One teams have come together, and these are teams that on a race weekend are fighting for hundreds of seconds, and yet we're now collaborating, and they have built ventilators that are saving lives, and they're producing a mass volume of them that's making a massive difference. So I think really, again, it's kind of what we touched on earlier, that this kind of collaborative society, I'm hoping, will become the new norm, and that we will go, hey, how about if we did that and you did that, and together we can produce that?
Yeah.
Amazing. Suddenly the world becomes a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, they get better collaborations and just a meld of minds, because like you said, extrapolating some of the lessons learned from Formula One, it just even helps me within my day-to-day practice. The marginal gains, the constant desire to change and adapt and improve is helpful to me. How has, since I see, because I met you first and foremost in about 2008. I was thinking, it's almost 12 years ago. It's 12 years ago.
That makes me feel really old.
How has the Natalie Pinkham of today changed versus the Natalie Pinkham of 2008 in regards to how has work changed you, and how has family changed you, for better or worse? Hopefully for better, but how is it sort of, because again, it was probably quite a different Natalie Pinkham, not entirely so, but in 2008 to who you are now, both career and family.
I mean, look, I think obviously the major shift is when you have kids. There's no doubt that everything changes. I felt vulnerable in a way that I'd never felt before when I had kids. I felt, you kind of question, you kind of think and consider your own mortality, because suddenly you're like, wow, actually I'm not just keeping myself alive for me now. I've got to do it for these two little sprogs. And obviously because you're giving birth, it's pretty full on experience. And, I didn't have the easiest of births. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, I could car get hit. That would be a shocker because, I've got these two kids to look after. So I've definitely felt vulnerable in a way that I never have before, but I felt love in a way that I never had before. Everybody talks about this love that you have for children. And, of course you think what love is before you have kids, but I definitely didn't. Until I had kids, I suddenly went, oh, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like overwhelming, incredible sense of love that then just gives perspective on everything. And I think really what that then does is it makes you probably better at your job, because you don't get as anxious about the stupid stuff that doesn't matter. So you're probably a bit more relaxed about it, and you go, it's only telly, it really doesn't matter if I fluff a word, and I'm only human. And actually I kind of think viewers quite like it if people do a blooper on telly. I think people quite like it. That's my excuse anyway. But I think that you then just go, I've now got my priorities sorted, and I know what really matters in life, and I know who I've got to be here for. But I also think and it's funny because when Caroline died, my friend died earlier this year, I had days when I just thought, God, what's it all about? Like, why am I even bothering? Like, nothing matters. And then I swung back to, no, do you know what? I've just absolutely got to make the best of every second of every minute. And I've got an even stronger sort of steely determination to be the best version of myself. It sounds so cheesy to say.
No.
But I believe it now. And I do, I want to be the best mum. I think the problem comes though, when you go, I want to be the best broadcaster I can be and the best mum I can be. And sometimes, you think, how can I be the best at both of those? Because one always will end up undermining the other. And obviously being a mum is my priority. That comes above all else. But I do know that, going back to my earlier point, that I want to be a strong role model to them. It's interesting, actually, one of the old team owners in Formula One, I had a bit of a heart-to-heart with him after a race once. And I said, I'm really struggling to know whether to keep going with my career or just be a full stay-at-home mum. And he said, look, I've got to say that my kid, like his 14-year-old boy, said something quite disparaging about mothers, about women, not mothers, women generally. And he realized it's because his wife had never worked, and he just had this view that his mum spent his dad's money. Dad went out and worked, mum spent the money, and sort of just floated around going to lunches and getting her hair and nails done. And he said, I wasn't proud of my son at that moment, but I realized that he's a product of his environment, and that is what he's learned from his mum. So I went, yes, come on. I'm being a better mum if I'm a stronger role model, and I'm a stronger role model if I'm prepared to work hard and get my hands dirty and, do good stuff. And outside of, F1, that obviously includes volunteer work and charity work that I always want to sort of get the kids understanding the importance of that.
So just to that point, actually, Natalie, one thing I've always loved about your character and just about who you are is just fundamentally as a person, it's just, you're just real. And I think that dose of reality not only comes across, hopefully, on screen, but just, I think it's born in, or in, not necessarily born in motherhood, but the expression and or fruition of it is in motherhood, and that maybe comes through to bleeds through to your career and to presenting. But because as you know, when you were with me for that day in 2008, being a paramedic is like taking a reality pill every day. It's like swallowing the harshest reality every day. But
I don't know how you do it. I would say you therapy, like every, you know, a regular kind of like, just to, I don't know, just to dump all this emotion and angst and everything. You must have to download what
Alcohol.
you see and
Alcohol.
hear. Alcohol.
No, it's not. But yeah, just, you're right. Just mindfulness and exercise and a real,
Yeah.
just that meditation. But I really appreciate the honesty that you bring, just when you're on screen, off screen, just as a person. Is that well received across the board? Because I know some people struggle with honesty. I find it refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? I don't know. Thanks for saying that. I don't know. It's not really necessarily a conscious decision of mine. I just do feel that you can't take yourself too seriously, and you know, I don't like don't like it when people do. You learn pretty quickly who does.
Yeah.
I think you're maybe like in a sport like Formula One, you're quite limited on how much you can really express yourself, which is probably a good thing, because I might get a bit carried away. Look, you're never going to be everyone's cup of tea either, and I think that's something that definitely changed in me when I became a mum, is that I used to care too much what other people thought. I used to get so upset, you know, especially like in my 20s, for example. I wanted to please everybody all the time, and I know you just can't do it, and it's, you know what, it's exhausting, and really no one really cares.
Yeah.
Like, they've got their own stuff to be thinking about, you know, there's so much else going on. But you know, when you know, I don't know, like if I used to get like mortified if I saw something about myself in the paper that wasn't true, but there was just like a little snippet of truth to it, I'd be like, oh my God, I'd be like screwed up and work myself up over it. And nobody cares. But I tell you what, they remember, because they go, oh, weren't you that girl that did that? What, you know, and you just go, no, I didn't, but you've remembered that. So I know they don't really care, but they definitely log it somewhere back here. But I think in the sort of dawn of social media, and you know, this kind of finger pointing and these keyboard warriors that load it onto you, it would be absolutely knackering to just take all of that into account. And I definitely think becoming a mum makes you go, you know, that does not matter. Just, I used to get my mates to like reply to people if they trolled me. I used to try and get, if Daily Mail comments, I used to go, can you put something nice underneath that comment? I just don't read the comments. Daily Mail comments will never be nice. You could literally be Mother Teresa and they will find a way of saying, yeah, she's some bitter and twisted old nun. She's not really doing good for the world. You know what I mean? Like they I don't know who those people are on the Daily Mail. I think they should be. And actually, we joke about it, but when I look at my friend Caroline Flack and her death, you know, there's serious consequences to those comments, and to but that's, you know, that's a conversation for another day. But I'm waffling now, aren't I? Oh, I know what I was going to say to you. I remember this one girl tweeting me and going, "Oh, I can hear someone coming in." I thought it was one of the kids. It's my husband on all fours, crawling.
Hello.
What are you doing? Oh, he's coming to get his gym kit from the box.
It's okay.
I thought it was one of the kids. Yeah, I was thinking about the this tweet I got, and this girl messaged me saying, God, you know, I really hate Natalie Pinkham. And she actually atted me. So she obviously wanted me to read it. She goes, really hate. And I thought, oh, that's not really nice. So I messaged her back again. It's a shame because I really like you. And she was like, what? And obviously I was, you know, don't know who the hell she was, but I just was joking. Anyway, she wrote back. She goes, I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay. Don't worry about it. And I said, do you want to come down to the F1 show? I knew she was an F1 fan because it said F. You know. And she goes, yeah. I said, well, do you want to come down? Do you want to bring some mates? And she went, yeah. Anyway, all her mates, then she turns out she was 15, this girl. And I don't know, there'd been some comment that her mates had made that, oh, they liked what I was wearing. And she goes, well, I don't. And they had an argument about it. So she decided she hated me because of this. Anyway, she came down to the F1 show and she was the sweetest girl. And I said to her, do you know what? It doesn't matter that you said that to me because I'm robust enough and thick-skinned. It doesn't matter. But just be aware that actually that might affect people more. She goes, no, I completely get it now. And I'm really sorry. And that's it. Honestly, you don't have to apologize to me. But it did make me think that the old me, you know, I don't think I would have bitten, but I would have definitely got really upset by that comment. And, you know, there's literally no point.
So to that point, Caroline, I totally agree, Natalie. Just I think, you know, just not being I don't know, attaching a sense of identity to online comments necessarily, or like I said, I have to engage with social media just for some of the podcasts, but I don't necessarily. I try not to take it too seriously as well. And just something, you articulately described just there is actually people in person are far different. Social media is almost like this car, you're driving a car and you'll say, I'm famous for this, speaking profanities. And then actually you wind the window down and I'm like, actually, we're just two people. We're just literally two people. And so to your point, I absolutely don't necessarily associate comments always with a true reflection of who that person is. And I think it's right to do that, just as you did with that girl, because otherwise you almost cleave a sense of identity from it, and it can be quite damaging.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's a really good point, actually, because I went to see this amazing woman who you should talk to called Julia Samuel. Is an incredible woman. She's a psychotherapist, and she helped me deal with my friend's death. And she said, if you're going to put yourself on social media, you actually have to carve two identities for yourself. One that you're prepared to put out there and you're prepared to be criticized for, because let's face it, we're all going to be, if you're going to be in the public eye in any way, you've got to be prepared to be criticized, and keep the other one back. Sorry, they're just emptying the bottle bank by the pub down the road. You can hear that noise. And keep the other one back and keep that protected and keep that just a place that you trust, just, your family and friends. But what was your other point? I can't remember now. Distracted by the bottle bank.
Yeah, it's just, you're right. So it's not being embodied or indeed a sense of identity from that. But also people are lovely underneath it all. Generally, most people are good and good-spirited people.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So this one bloke sort of did a little troll to me, and I'd said something about politics, and he went, listen, love, stick to the F1, don't know what you're talking about type thing. And I sort of bantered back with him because I did politics at uni. That doesn't mean that I've got a right to have an opinion, but I think everyone has a right to have an opinion on politics. It affects us all, doesn't it? But I did it tried to do it in a funny way. And he then started getting trolled by my followers. And I was like, oh no, I didn't mean that to happen. So then I started DMing him going, I'm really sorry. I didn't want you to get, criticism or abuse. And he was like, no, don't worry about it. But that's what happens if, all these people with followers actually have a responsibility not to do what they are accusing others of. Because the minute you bite at someone that's trolling you, boom, they get this tsunami of abuse from all your followers, and you're just as bad as them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's really just approaching it with that lightheartedness. Just to your earlier point, Natalie, as we come into land, just about not taking yourself too seriously. And just what I love about that is just being willing to, sometimes just laugh at yourself, like some of my own mistakes, just through the podcast, or indeed just in clinical practice. And I'm just, my relationship with failure has had to become one. I'm sure it's yours doing presenting, and me doing a little bit more presenting now. I'm just constantly like, Owen, what the fuck was that? But just sitting with it and thinking, it's okay. It's all right, as long as we get to where we need to be at the end of the day. That's okay. And
I mean, slightly more important that you don't make mistakes in your job than me, mine.
Absolutely, as a paramedic, absolutely. But you're right, that climb down is absolutely key. and I've just had to do that on a consistent basis, really. But listen, Natalie, what I would love to do, just as we're gathering sort of a fellowship basis, is just point people to your platform as well, because I've listened to some of your episodes and they're fantastic. You know, some of the people I know, a lot of people I don't know, but just a lovely deep dive into the lives of others, and just how you bring that out in them. So how would people find you or find your if they?
That's very kind, thank you. It's In the Pink, and it is on all podcast platforms, and it's just me talking to mostly people in sport, but a few in entertainment, a few musicians and models and TV people, just anyone I think's got an interesting story. We just have it's almost like a bit like a therapy session. It's a bit like the chat we've just had, isn't it? Just talking, communicating, and just hearing people's stories. So In the Pink, and then obviously I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all the other. Actually, I've just joined TikTok as well.
Okay, what is TikTok? I don't know what it is.
I'm still trying to work that out. But it's funny, and I'm trying to get to
music
with it.
Dancing and dancing and music and
it's cool though. I like it.
Yeah.
I need to get the kids to buy into it, but they're probably a little bit too young at the moment. Yeah. But my daughter's a complete show pony like me, so I think she'll be into it quite soon.
That's awesome. But listen, definitely, just for people who are listening to this, definitely check that out, because there's some fantastic conversations on there, and just some fantastic deep dives into some really engaging people. Natalie, I just want to say you are a legend. I extend, you can come out with me as a paramedic whenever you want. I
would love to. Can I honestly do that again? I think actually we should pitch that as another idea. Because I truly mean this. I think there is an interest in what you do now more than there's ever been, and there's an appreciation and respect. The fact that it's Thursday today, so we'll do our clap at 8:00 again tonight. Do you know what? There's just this. There is just an awareness of the NHS in a way that there hasn't been in my lifetime before, and we absolutely need to capitalise on that. Like that lovely old boy he's raised like 15 million quid. The 99-year-old. Just these great feel-good stories, and we need to be pumping those out there more, and drawing more attention and detail to your work. I think is something that I need to do as a broadcaster, and we all have a duty to do, because you are the real heroes in all of this. I know it's embarrassing that we're talking about you like this. I know that it's all a bit much. Your modesty prevents you from lapping it up, but you should, because you're amazing.
Well, listen, I would love to have you out with me. It was great to do so before, and I'd love to do it again. So we'll definitely sort that out. We will sort that out for sure. But listen, thank you so much just for your time today.
Thank you. I've just noticed how sunburnt I am.
I know. Check it out. It will turn brown. That's what my mother used to say. It will always turn brown. You'll be a bronze.
Brentford, baby.
It'll turn brown. It will. Listen, you're a legend, Natalie, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Owen. Take care.